when you all finally decided on the title of your book, why the title? And how does that title speak to the moment and the future?
That's a big question. So, before I start, I just want to give honor to my son, Milan, who the book was actually, I was inspired to write this book because of him. There would be no Mael, there would be no Glory in Your Story if it wasn't for his life, his birth, and his death. He has made a huge impact in all of our lives. So today is his birthday. So it is just, I'm not gonna cry, but this is just, I feel blessed to be here to talk about my story because it is my testimony, and I know that we overcome by sharing our testimony, and that's why my book is titled The Glory in Your Story, because I think when people look at Mael and they see this success and they look at it as like an overnight success, they see the glory of it, right? And from the very beginning of when we started the company, and I say we because I built the company with my husband, he would always say the story must be told, because it's not really our story, it's his story. And the things that I have gone through, the good, the bad, the ugly, all things work together for the good. And I think it's important for us to own our narratives, to own our stories, to not be ashamed, because our stories can be someone else's lifeline. So while people look at me as this so-called picture-perfect entrepreneur, I want people to also understand that, I didn't get here by chance. I got here by dealing with my grief, healing from my grief, and being obedient to the calling that God has had on my life for a very long time that I tried to ignore. But it took for me to go through something as devastating as losing my son when I was 8 months pregnant, to have the faith and the courage to start Mael. So, like I said, my son, he came here for a very short time, but his life was so impactful because he started my healing journey, he started my faith journey, and he gave me the courage to step out and do something that was deemed impossible.
Thank you. Alencia.
So, hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here. So my book, Flip the Tables, The Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change. And the title comes from my favorite story of Jesus, when he went in that temple and flipped over them tables, because he didn't like what was happening in his father's house. And I think about the time when the concept of the book came to me. It was the very beginning of the pandemic, when we realized, we're going to be home more than a month. Like, this is real, right? And so we're watching everything that's happening on TV between what we thought was the craziest election ever, and then 2024 happened, but I digress. We were watching the murder of George Floyd and the protests against that. And a lot of us, those of us who have privilege to be at home, we're unpacking a lot of things. We're sitting with ourselves in different ways. And so I was in between campaigns at the time, between Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign and before I said yes to working for President Biden's campaign. And I was just trying to figure out what was next for myself. And I knew that there were things that I wanted to do in the world, but I felt, and I'm grateful for my career and grateful for the vessel that I've been, deemed to be. But I knew that there were things that I still wanted to achieve, even though other people had other plans for me, and I had to figure out what were God's plans for me and what were my own plans, and what is the courage that it takes to live in that purpose and authenticity. So I'm also getting calls from people in the entertainment industry, some fashion labels, corporations, of what do we do in this moment? How do we show up? How do we have impact? How do I disrupt what's happening in the world around us? And they're asking for answers, and I'm trying to figure out the answer myself. And what I realized is that we are looking, I think folks, and this is what happens when I'm fortunate enough to, give a lot of commentary about politics. So folks think you need this big platform, that you need to be able to speak in front of thousands of people. But what I realize is I need every person to live in their courage and purpose and be the catalyst in their community, because we each have our own sphere of influence, and that is what disrupts the world around us. Right? I think so many of us are looking for a Dr. King who could speak in front of millions, but it took millions of people for that to happen, right? And that's why it was so important for me to actually name my grandmother, the late Ozella Bennett, in my book, because her work that nobody knows about until I write about her also helped the civil rights movement. And so I wanted everybody to realize that we can be everyday disruptors so long as we find the courage to make change. And that's the title of the book. And I tie it back to Jesus flipping over tables, because I was laying in bed one day and I was like, what got Jesus so prompt that he wanted to flip over those tables? Like, what got him to that point? And then I asked, what would get all of us to that point where we will flip over some tables in our communities? But most importantly, as I was going through a journey to find my own courage, what would get us to the point of flipping over the tables in our lives and disrupting ourselves, which is why the book starts with, if you haven't read it yet, I'm going to drag you to facing yourself in the mirror, because in order for us to change the things around us, we first have to change ourselves and have the courage to do that. And so that's where the title came from.
The title of my book is Legacy: A Black Physician Reckons with Racism in Medicine. And I think that, for me, legacy has multiple meanings. So one is, obviously the legacy of racism in medicine. I wanted to be able to help readers connect the dots for why in 2025 we see the disparate health outcomes that we see. Maternal mortality. Why is it more dangerous for me to give birth than a white woman with an 8th grade education, right? So I wanted to make sure that there's so much history that I never even learned in medical school or as a practicing physician that I wanted to teach people about. And then obviously the second part of the legacy is being a second generation Black woman physician. I had the honor of my mother is the original Dr. Blackstock. She actually passed away when my twin sister and I were only 19 years old. So we only had her for 19 years. She was 47, the age I am now. And I will tell you, my heart broke when she died. And I feel like all the work that I've been doing since then has been really in her memory, because she and other Black women physicians were doing the work that we call health equity in the 80s and 90s in our central Brooklyn neighborhood. But the book is also my own journey. So my own journey of leaving what people would have thought was the picture-perfect career in academic medicine, where I had multiple titles, multiple roles, and thinking that I probably was so happy when I was actually silenced and muzzled in my role. And I had to make this decision to leave my career, and I did at a time in 2020 when the pandemic started. I became one of the first voices in the pandemic to talk about racial health inequities. And I've been able to speak truth to power. Thank you to Tracy, founder of this book festival, who discovered me on air during my second appearance on TV. And she said, Uché, you had so much passion, you had so much to say, but I think it's about really standing in your truth, and that's what I hear a lot of, what's in common on this panel.
Thank you. Alencia, Flip the Table speaks to the heart of people who feel powerless. I can imagine people in the audience who's here to listen to you all today, they are having a moment or have had moments of feeling powerless. Yep. What does it look like, and how do you write about and flip the tables? How do you stand and own your power?
So I'm grateful that I actually had finished the first draft of the book in the middle of 2024. And I'm glad I did, because I was going through the editing while all the craziness of the election was happening, and then the shift to Vice President Harris becoming the nominee. And I'm sharing this. The book is not a political book. You would actually be very surprised. But it is important to contextualize that, because Vice President Harris losing, and I'm speaking about this because the audience were Black women, her losing felt very much like a personal attack on all of us as Black women, right? Like, that felt like we know the system that America has been built on rejects us as Black women, but to feel it, right? To see it at that scale. I worked on her campaign. It took me 2 days to get out of bed. And what helped me get out of bed, this kind of encapsulates the book. I heard this Alice Walker quote, and I actually ended up putting in the preface of the book after the election. I'm paraphrasing it, but she said, you have to maintain a healthy soul in the face of constant oppression. And what spoke out to me were a couple of things. Constant oppression is a reminder that it's going to always be something that we are fighting against. Because this nation was built on our ancestors either being brought here to labor or give birth to labor, right? And the system isn't conditioned to protect us. And so if we are constantly fighting for our liberation, what does maintaining a healthy soul look like? It is the joy and the rest. All of those things actually have to work together. And when you feel hopeless, I cling on. I'm a person, obviously a person of deep faith. I mean, my book, Flip the Tables. But you got to hold on to something bigger than yourself. That's why I use the word courage instead of brave, because courage reminds us that there is something greater than our fear to keep going forward. Because the fear will still be there. The other piece is I realized when I finally got out of bed, I was taking a long walk in my neighborhood. I said, oh, deep community is how we're going to get through this. And you talk about that in your book, No One is Self-Made, which y'all should also get as well. Came up this in February. We don't know how to really be in community with one another in the ways that our ancestors were. I live in a new building in the DMV area, and I try to talk to this one neighbor, a sister. She's like, oh, hey, and she keep running. And I'm like, sis, when it's about to go down, trust you gonna want to know me, because I'm gonna know what's going on, right? And I was like, wow, we can't even have this conversation with one another, but we can be in our phone, or we can, have all these solutions and talk on these panels, but we can't even be in real community with one another to actually look out for one another, especially when these systems are failing us. My parents retired and then opened a nonprofit that provides housing assistance and food assistance to those in need in their rural community. I went with them to a town hall. Those elderly folks are angry and are like, how do we intervene? And I'm sharing this so that when we feel hopeless, we have to dig deep within ourselves, figure out the why we are so committed to this work, and get in community with one another, because it is particularly my sisterhood that has been like, well, no, sis, like, rest today, but like tomorrow, we have to get up and go do this, and I'm going to do it with you. And the only way that we're going to be able to have people doing it with us is if we are in deep community. And so that's what gives me hope. And to be honest, I also think about our ancestors. I also, in this, I get very quiet. It's okay to cut out the noises and you hear. And when I heard, so I was walking in the grocery store when I heard this. My ancestors were like, we did all this. We have all the solutions. You just have different tools. So we've been here before. But when we are so distracted with the chaos, which is a tool of oppression, we can't hear that. So it's the community and actually digging into our DNA that our ancestors left us the playbook.
Absolutely. Monique, I'm coming to you. So you write about deeply personal things in your book. What story was hard for you to tell, but you had to tell it to complete the book?
I would say that the entire book, I don't think there is one part that I can pick out to say, like, this is a story that I had to tell. I had to tell the entire story. I journal. I'm really big on journaling because I feel like that is my ability to have a conversation with God, to get my prayers out there. And so my book was really like a compilation of my journal entries over the past 10 years of just me, expressing myself, going back to those moments where I was feeling down and being able to extract that feeling, that emotion from that time. So when I put everything together and, I completed the project, I looked at the book and I said, wow, job well done. I was really proud of myself for being able to be so vulnerable and to be so transparent and to share things that I had never shared with my community. I am a pretty reserved, private person. I'm open, but I'm closed. And so being able to share a very deep personal part of who I am and how I started my company, I shared the highs and the lows. I shared the moments, when we were in the hole and we were trying to figure out how do we climb ourselves out of this to still sustain our business. I shared the moments where, my husband had to rush me to the hospital to deliver my son and to find out that he had no brain activity. Like, I shared deep personal moments, but for me it was very cathartic to be able to just express myself, and it was healing for me. So that's why I say this book is not just about, it's not a self-help book. This book is about healing, being obedient to the calling that God had on my life, and also my faith journey. I feel that as an entrepreneur in my space, not a lot of entrepreneurs are very vocal about their faith. It's kind of like taboo. You don't talk about God. But I'm very vocal because I know that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Like, we have to be bold about our faith because none of us would be sitting in this room if it wasn't for that. And when I think about the risk of starting my Yale, growth happens when you step out of your comfort zone. And I'm just very thankful that, I went through the trials, because writing this book and starting this company, I was able to discover a different version of myself that I didn't even know was there. Right? And when you think about risk and growth, people are more comfortable with the comforts of today and their past versus the risk of their future. So your future self will thank you for the calculated risk that you take today. And again, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if I didn't take the leap, if I didn't take the risk to say, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm no longer going to continue to live my life on someone else's dreams. And I think that my book will also inspire others to dream big, because a lot of us are trapped in dreams that our parents wanted for us, which is what I was. So I want people to be bold, go after their dreams, figure out their purpose, intersect their purpose with their passion, and your future self will thank you for that.
Dr. Uché, why your book is so special to me is that you lifted some people that we needed to know about. And what's so important about these books, all the books that you all have written, when you lift people's names, they become immortalized. They will live long after we have left. What story did you have to tell to ensure that this person is cemented into the future?
So, there are a lot of stories, but I think, and I know people in this audience have heard of Anarcha, Betsy, and Lucy, right? So those were Black enslaved women who were experimented on by Dr. J. Marion Sims, who's considered the father of modern gynecology. He was the first president of the American Medical Association, and he is someone who is highly revered within medicine, right? There was a statue of him in Central Park opposite the New York Academy of Medicine for many, many years. If you go into many hospitals, his picture is there. But he made these very important discoveries in the most horrific ways by experimenting on human beings who could not give consent, and doing so in a way where, even though there was local anesthetic, there was numbing medication around at the time, he did not use it on them. So performing surgeries. And I really wanted to lift their names because the way that these women had to give of their bodies without giving their consent, how do we give voice to them, right? How do we share this horrific experience, but at the same time, humanize them? And, I think for me, a lot of what I had to unlearn on my own journey is all of these people that I was told that I should respect, right? And all of these people who were, I was told that these are leaders. This is what leaders look like. And I'm like, I don't look like any of them. And I don't have the same values as any of them. And so for me, part of my journey has been, yes, uplifting these women who have contributed immensely to medicine, but at the same time, changing what it looks like to lead. So I can consider myself, I'm a compassionate leader. I cry, I'm vulnerable, I'm super sensitive, and yes, I can lead too. I can speak truth to power as well.
Thank you. I have two questions, but we have to be fast. Say fast, y'all. Fast. Right, we have to be fast. We have two questions left. Now we're gonna shift the conversation a little bit about the writing process. Tell me one thing, starting with you, Monique. that you found yourself doing during the writing process? And you're like, who knew? Who knew that I needed to do this in order to get this book out? You all are going to answer that question. What is one perk, one special thing that you did, one habit that you incorporated to get this book out?
Well, one habit that I would say I incorporated was really practicing stillness and being able to listen from God, because I wanted my book to come from Him. So when people are reading my book, I want them to know that this was Holy Spirit led. And in order to receive the Holy Spirit, you have to be still to listen. Exactly.
That was real good. Good job.
I had to realize that, like, something beautiful can be birthed out of chaos. And so, like, because there are a lot of writers who will say, I wake up every morning and write for these 2 hours and then have a whole day. That was not my process. There would be like 2 weeks where I wouldn't touch the book. But so I got still, I would listen to gospel music. It would let me like really work through the book. But also, I had to get to a place, I'm a Virgo, but I tell my business in the book and I had to be real vulnerable. And when I got through that, it was, everything else came easier. Once I wrote the thing that I was scared to say, everything else became easier.
Okay, fast. So 2 things. One, when my kids, so my boys are here, Ellington and Cameron, they're 8 and 10. My inspirations for this book, but I would, once they were sleeping at night, right? Once they went to bed, I would start writing. I would write for like 3 hours. They're like, Mommy, when are you writing your book? I'm like, when you are sleeping, because I have multiple roles, right? And so I had to like wait for that stillness, right? That stillness was after 8:30 or 9 when they should be in bed. But that was a time that I just feel, relaxed. I can be vulnerable and write what I had to write.
Final question. By the show of hands, who feel you have a book inside of you? Okay. I want you all hold your hands up one more time. Hold them high. And I want y'all to see those hands. Almost everybody here understands the assignment that we must write our books. But there is something between understanding the assignment and pursuing it. Starting with you, Monique, if a point of advice of why they must write their book.
You must write your book because I kind of said this in the beginning, your story will be someone else's lifeline. And even if you haven't written your book yet, there's still a purpose in the waiting, because delay doesn't always mean denial. There's purpose in your book, and purpose doesn't always make noise in the beginning. So go for it. Don't let anyone stop you. Don't tell everybody your dreams, because there will be people that will try to talk you out of writing your book, and that's just nothing but the devil, the enemy, because God knows how powerful your story and your testimony is, and the devil don't want to get that out. So when you get those thoughts of fear, doubt, anxiety that starts to creep in, you know that that's not from God, it's from the enemy, and the enemy is trying to stifle what God has put inside of you. That fire, let that fire be ignited and share your story with the world.
So 2 things real quick. Some of the reason that y'all are so scared to tell your story is you're comparing yourselves to folks who don't look like us, who have been quote unquote successful. And let me tell you, when I thought my writing wasn't good, I would open some bestseller. Now my book became a bestseller too, but I would open some of these bestsellers by some of these not nominated authors. It was the most basic writing. And I said, oh, our bare minimum is excellence. So stop tripping yourselves up and canceling yourself before you even let it out into the world. The second piece, because I was scared, when I was dragging my feet in the proposal process, a friend of mine would call me. He would call me literally like every other month. He would cuss me out, and he'd be like, you're being selfish. I said, what are you talking about? He said, that book isn't for you. God gave you that story to this point for everyone else. And I had to be obedient. I was being selfish with what everyone else in the world needed. And so we are which is part of what I talk about in the book. We are all connected. And if you're not obedient to your story, she can't be obedient to her story. And then she can't be, and then he can't be. And so when we think about that great responsibility, you'll have a little bit of urgency in writing your story and getting it out in the world.
So I'll say, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, would I have a New York Times bestseller? Would I be an author? I would look at you like you had lost your mind. But what happened was I was living in alignment. My literary agent heard me on the radio one day, and she cold emailed me and said, I looked you up, and you have a story to tell, and you're the only person to tell that story. And yes, I know. But the point is that because I was doing the work that gave me purpose. I was finally out of an environment that had stifled me and made me feel like I was someone who didn't have gifts to share. I left what was a perfect academic career to start my own company, right, to speak about health inequities. And so I will say this, we all have a story to tell, and you're the only person to tell that story. And what the story that you tell is going to validate and affirm somebody else, and they're going to be so grateful to you. So we have to tell our stories. So pick up that pen, open that laptop, and start writing.
And it's history. And it's history. And what I would say in closing is that the future would need to know the way. They would need to know the path. They would need breadcrumbs. They would need the map. They would need the compass. Your books can be and will be that. Y'all, we have some work to do. You have an assignment. If you do not have their books, what is the job? Get the book. If you have the book and you have not left a review, leave them a review. And make sure, if you have read the book, buy it for someone else. In order for these books and all these people to be successful, for all of us to be successful, we need your active participation. Give them another big hand.